Welcome to the Leadership Bits and Bytes podcast, featuring Rhoda Kreuzer, CEO of Partners in Action.
This morning, we are excited to have a special guest with us on Leadership Bits and Bytes, where we introduce strong leaders within our community, telling their story, sharing with us the things that they've learned along the way. This morning we have Dr. Bobby Belmonte, who grew up in Grand Rapids. He went to Michigan State. Yay, I'm an MSU grad. And he is fully certified in the 5 essentials of health. His clinic is at the forefront of the total wellness movement. And he's really committed to seeing lives change both locally and globally. He's served in clinics all around the world. And so we're just so excited to have you here today with us so that we can talk about the exciting things that you're doing right here in Lowell, Michigan.
Amen. Yeah, it's exciting to be here, and it is really an interesting time in healthcare. And I think people are recognizing that there's something wrong with the current approach towards health, but yet at the same time, with all of the information that we have available to us on Google, still struggle to figure out how to apply those principles of health to themselves, so therefore they can actually just get healthy, stay healthy.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why you're here, because you can help us gain some insights. First, tell us a little bit about your medical practice, what you do.
Well, it's about integration.
Okay.
There's a time and a place for everything. We know that there is value in medicine and surgery, but not every symptom requires drugs and surgery.
Okay.
And so when we think about what is health? Where does it come from? How do you get it? How do you keep it? And the closer we can work with the body itself is really designed well to heal itself, so it needs certain things, right? You can't live without water.
Right.
This is a fact.
Right.
And there's nobody signing up for that double-blind study to figure out how long can you live without water.
Right. Yeah.
But we learned it's somewhere between 3 to 5 days, depending on other factors and variables. And so there's just certain things that are essential for living, meaning you just can't live without them. So what are those things?
Right.
And if we can do a better job to help people understand where those things might be missing in their life, we're often able to help them get better, stay better, and a lot of times without medication or surgery.
Yeah. So it sounds like in your practice, you're really working to take some of the principles of being a chiropractor, as well as broadening that to look at what are all the interrelationships, and taking that holistic view. Would that be accurate?
Yeah. I think if you really kind of look at 2 main approaches towards health, there's treating symptoms, and then there's addressing the root cause.
Okay.
And so we just really spend a lot more time and energy to better understand what's actually causing the problem.
Yeah.
And in order to really kind of get, to the bottom of that, it's really got to start with relationship. We just believe relationship is everything. The more we can spend time to understand exactly who you are, what you've been through, what you've tried, we find in that, there's trust. Then that leads to vulnerability, and then we can really start to identify where can you start making simple changes that can create real lasting change when it comes to your body getting healthier.
Right. So do you find that as you begin working with a patient, that relationship between yourself and the patient is also important in building that trust? Because I'm sure as you're trying to offer insights, you're trying to offer guidance to them, they have to trust that is going to, in fact, help them.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Without relationship, I don't know if there's much. And I think this is the challenge, right, that we've run into, even just with traditional Western medicine, is it's just there's a lot of people that need help.
Right.
They're on a timetable.
Right.
And you've got 7 minutes to do the best you can to diagnose the problem and then treat the symptom. And depending on your specialty,
Right.
you're often very limited when it comes to what you can offer as a solution,
Right.
at least if you want to get paid.
Yeah.
And so when we think about more of a complete, comprehensive healthcare system, that would allow the doctor not only to spend more time with the patient,
Yeah.
but then to make recommendations freely, regardless of how they get paid.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, the most important thing here is relationship. And so when we keep the efforts local,
Yeah.
I want to just be in relationship with people in the community, honestly, for the rest of my life.
Right.
So it's a long-term focus
Right.
that changes dramatically the short-term interactions. And as a result of that, not only are we able to see people get really healthy,
Yeah.
but then we also see people kind of giving back to the community, empowering one another. We always say, we help you so you can help others.
Right. Which is really what leadership is about, right? It's about having that ability to reproduce yourself in other people and cause them to be successful and better and more of the best version of themselves, as opposed to just checking the boxes. So how did you come across that philosophy? Because that seems very different from probably what a lot of people in the medical profession would maybe share. And so I'm curious, what has sparked that kind of insight for you?
Yeah, well, that would be my own testimony.
Yeah.
As I was just deathly sick as a kid, experiencing hundreds of seizures, severe complications with type 1 diabetes, in and out of a hospital, and seeing a lot of great doctors.
Yeah.
And I believe they really care.
Right.
It's not a matter of them caring.
Right.
However, even though I'm doing all of these things to get myself better, none of it's really working. And I can just imagine there's probably just a whole lot of people that are in that same boat. They're trying things, it's not working. As a result of that, they're getting hopeless. And that can lead to all kinds of challenges when it comes to anxiety and depression. And that's exactly where I was at. From the outside looking in, you might observe, I'm a Division I athlete. I had a full ride scholarship playing football at Michigan State.
Wow.
I'm studying to be a cardiologist. I'm doing really well in school. I've always wanted to help people, but yet it wasn't working for me. And it wasn't until I met a Christ-centered chiropractor that was also double trained in physical therapy, and then had certifications and understanding of nutrition, hydration, exercise. And so at that point, I've already experienced hundreds of seizures, 2 comas, almost died twice before the age of 23, but yet I'm also still pursuing my dream, which is to become a doctor. At that time, I still wanted to play professional football. And then it just comes to this screeching halt where now I find myself just not wanting to live.
Wow. Yeah. And you're right. So much of what happens physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, that all gets tied together.
It sure does.
And
more than I think what people imagine.
Oh, I'm sure. And
so as I start working at, looking into what actually is causing all of this, and that's what Dr. Dykstra, the chiropractor that I was seeing, just really spent a lot of time helping me to understand. And then I started to realize that I had problems in my spine affecting my nervous system. Just have a simple thought, right? Your brain controls everything in the body.
Right.
That's something you would agree with?
Yeah.
Yep. I haven't met anyone yet
who disagrees.
Who disagrees.
Yeah.
So when you think about how does that happen, through the spinal cord, through the nerves, and so the structure of the spine can really affect the function of the nervous system. No different than just how structure determines function in every other area of life. Think about just the walls, right? Holding the roof up over our head right now.
Yeah.
We're just trusting that it was structurally engineered properly. And we've spent trillions of dollars to get 1 degree right when it comes to buildings and bridges.
Right.
And so when we think about the structure of the spine, it will determine the function of the nervous system. Yeah. And so when we look back to, early, 1895, this is what the original chiropractors had discovered.
Yeah.
And as they started addressing structural problems within the spine, they started observing people were healing.
Right.
And at that time, they actually coined the term kairos, which is faith or Christ, practic, laying on of hands.
Okay.
And there was this idea all the way back then that if we can integrate certain disciplines of medicine with holistic living and incorporate faith into that we could address these things that are just interfering with our body's ability to heal better. And it is all directly connected, mentally, physically, spiritually.
Wow. That is great insight. And I think, it's one of those things that many times we don't pay attention to, or we don't always think about that wholeness and that holistic view, and so we end up putting band-aids on things that could be changed. I'm curious, how have you led the way with that? Within your organization, even, are there things that you're doing maybe with your team to even inspire them with that journey?
Yeah, well, we'll just go right back to relationships. So when we think about like the teams that we get to work with, just in doing what we can to ensure that like they're leading and living their healthiest, best life. Mm-hmm. And so when we think about like benefits, right? Like there's always like the work, then there's the pay, and then there's the benefits, right? So like what are those additional benefits? And to be able to receive, full benefits of care that allows us to incorporate all of that. Because could you on your own put together like all of these teams and have a medical doctor that thinks a little more holistically, have a naturopath, have a chiropractor, have a counselor, maybe have opportunities to, interact with your pastor? And could you put all of that together and then get everyone in a room to actually talk about you?
Right.
When it comes to like, what is it that you need? Maybe.
Right.
But for most, probably not.
Yeah.
And so that's the vision, is that we would just, house all of these health professionals, counselors, pastors, doctors under one roof. So therefore, not only can we integrate the care, but more importantly, we can collaborate on exactly what it is that you're going through, what you're struggling with, and that might look different, this week versus, 3 months down the road. Life happens, things change.
Right.
And so the more we can just, again, be in relationship and spend time, out of that relationship comes vulnerability, and through the vulnerability of just sometimes not knowing what to do, even when it comes to leadership. I mean, there's plenty of things that I just still don't know yet.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm blessed to be surrounded by people that do.
Yeah.
And so like as a community, coming together to spur each other on to help one another.
Yeah.
And it's not just an internal effort, it's an external effort.
Yeah.
This idea that like churches could help churches.
Right.
And kind of put aside their differences and their denominational differences.
Sure.
As we're all just working to kind of lead people to Christ and see God's kingdom advance.
Yeah.
Businesses helping businesses. What would that look like for your neighbor to understand that you're going through a tough season of life, and for them to come alongside and free up some of their resources to support your efforts? Because together, if we focus on just our smaller communities, we find we can do a lot more together
Absolutely.
and actually make an impact.
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue into what we want to talk about next, which is going to really lead into some of the other efforts that you're doing within the community, because leadership doesn't just happen within our professional role, but it really happens throughout life. And so we're going to talk about that in the next half of our segment. And so I want to invite our listeners to stay with us at Leadership Bits and Bytes, and we will be talking more about that next.